Oh, sorry if I can get those in the chambers. Thank,
Thanks.
thank you, Michelle. Is there any, or rather, sorry, I did have a phone call with from Councillor Curie this past weekend, just to have a new business item for today's agenda. I know it's for a letter, I believe, for a letter of support. We do have Mr. Paul Robertson on the line this morning to talk about the. I really think it's an opportunity and really have a discussion on the matter itself. So thank you, Councillor Curie, for bringing this forward. And good morning, Paul, and welcome to General Finance. I know there's a time frame on the request, which is why we put it on as a new business item this morning. So, with that being said, I'll pass the forward over to yourself, Paul, to begin your presentation, and then look to your request, and then we can have a discussion in motion, hopefully after that. So, over to you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Mark. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very, very much for allowing me to speak and taking the time to listen to what of an opportunity that I think would be very positive for Six Nations. A little history just about myself. I've been involved with Six Nations for about 20 years, really. I've been helping you through my forestry company, Trees Unlimited, to help coordinate the gypsy moth spraying over the last 20 years. And I staff way back in the early 90s when gypsy moth first got started, and have been sort of working directly and indirectly with staff since that time, and most recently meeting with Mr. Bomberry and developing a relationship with him around forestry and some of the opportunities that could come up, and sort of waiting for something special that we thought would be very beneficial to you. I'm also the president of the Ontario Woodlot Association, which is a not-for-profit. We have a charitable arm, and we have about 3,000 members, and I circulated our Woodlander, which is our quarterly magazine that we put out every season. This latest one was on wildlife management, and I attached it to the documents that I sent to you. The reason why I bring that up is what makes the publication special is that it's almost entirely written by landowners, by woodlot owners. So again, it gives, members and non-members a really unique perspective of managing their forested lands and non-forested lands that is sort of at a grassroots level. And I encourage you to take a look at it. And it is a very successful publication. And at some point, if we felt that it would be beneficial to yourselves, then we certainly would be able to provide the electronic version that could be circulated. So, again, we can start to expand on our networking and include individuals from Six Nations, and that's something down the road. But what has happened in the last literally a couple of weeks is the Ontario Woodlot Association got this opportunity through Agriculture Canada. We were shortlisted in the first phase of this application process to develop living labs. And living labs are kind of a very unique way of taking something that's already taking place, that's innovative, but hasn't been able to be adopted across the landscape. And so, and this living lab through Ag Canada, it needs to, these activities, these innovations, these business opportunities, these training opportunities, because they can be quite a variety of different things. They are focused in this particular application towards the combination of agriculture and forestry. So for example, one of the things, so what we're proposing to yourselves is there's an opportunity to have a living lab, or even several of them, within Six Nations. So they don't have to be necessarily focused directly in Six Nations, but they could involve properties within the territory. So, for example, there are several living labs that we are suggesting that we think have value and a number of benefits. The program really focuses on carbon sequestration. That is the main focus of this. So we are looking at ways that we can use these innovations to further reduce fossil fuel consumption, and another is to increase carbon sequestration. There is a webinar that I'd love to send you that was done through the U.S. Forestry Service and Cornell University, where they looked at measuring the woodlots in the state of New York and see whether or not how they can play a role in combating climate change. And really what they found out is forests really, they are the critical means for us to increase carbon sequestration to slow the rate of temperature increase. And so what we're proposing in our living labs is we look at opportunities where we could reduce fossil fuels and increase carbon sequestration. And carbon sequestration, the way that you do it is improve the management of forested lands. So right now our forested lands are sequestering carbon. The problem is they're not sequestering enough. And so what the way you do that is through additionality, where you improve the management of the forested lands so they can sequester more carbon. So for example, the Ontario Woodlot Association, we recognized about 5 years ago that there are hundreds of thousands of acres of softwood plantations in the province that have not been thinned. They were designed to be thinned. Based on their spacing, they were supposed to be thinned at around year 40. Many of these plantations are over 60 years in age, and because of their age, they are starting to decline because the trees do not have enough room to grow. So through that decline, they are releasing carbon. And because they're not growing, they are not sequestering carbon. So in the cooperative model that we've done in Kawarthas in Huronia, where we have 2 co-ops trials on the go, what we're doing there is we're coordinating with landowners who are sort of these fragmented, orphaned plantations, and we're bringing them together, providing an economy of scale so that they can be thinned. And the wood that is extracted is stored carbon, and that's going into 2x4s and 4x4s and are in the industry, and the landowner benefits from the revenues that are generated from that. And then the thinning opens up the plantation so that it can sequester more carbon. And so that is just one example that is ongoing. The way that we're going to sort of design that living lab with the agroforestry is one of the things we're doing with these plantations is we have to herbicide to control the invasive species that have taken over the plantation. In this case, in Kawarthas, it's dog strangling vine. So our living lab is, instead of herbiciding, we could salvopasture. We can take goats and sheep, put it into the plantation. We know from other work that we've done that the pasturing from the livestock will destroy the invasive species. So in this case, we are combining this livestock grazing into the forestry part of our activities, reducing the use of herbicide, increasing the level of biodiversity. And then once the invasive species are under control, then we go ahead and do the thinning and release the trees and not the invasive species. So that is one example of a living lab. Another one that we're looking at doing is the reintroduction of the American chestnut. So there is one that we're looking at, and this is what we could look at involving landowners within the territory around non-traditional forest products. So we're looking at not only a version of silvopasturing, but also producing orchards, pawpaws, American chestnut, persimmon. I mean, there's a variety of nut-producing trees that we could grow that would produce a product would increase forest cover, would increase biodiversity, would engage employment and those types of activities. And then they would develop a new market. We have in Niagara, where our farm is, I'm also a farmer. We have 150 acres here that we farm and manage, which about half is forested. There is an appetite for pawpaw material at a local market. And so what we're looking at is building out that marketing and the ability, basically developing the market of selling non-traditional forest products, not just in Southern Ontario, but in the rest of the province. Another quick example of an agroforestry lab that we're looking at is grain dryers. Okay, there are a number of grain dryers. This is soybean corn dryer. They use propane to dry the corn. Well, I've been out into PI and they have these really very modern bio furnaces. They burn wood chips. They are incredibly efficient. There are 30 of them in the province of PI. They heat administrative buildings, retirement homes, high schools, and the chips are supplied by a group of woodlot owners and silviculturalists. And so they and the provincial government arrange the financing and construction of these bio furnaces. And what we're suggesting is, and we're looking for, is a bio furnace that is burning propane that we could convert to wood biomass. There would be an incredible reduction in the fossil fuels that is being used. There would be cost savings because the propane is incredibly expensive. And then we would develop a cooperative around that bio furnace that the woodlots, the surrounding woodlots would supply the wood chips through best management practices. And through that, we would add additionality in the forest by extracting carbon, but then allowing room for the carbon to grow inside the forest. And so what we would like to put forward to yourselves is the ability to discuss the potential going forward of some form of living labs within Six Nations. What we're asking right at this moment is just a letter of support. I actually thought the letter of support wasn't due until the middle of December. It turns out that it's due today. It can be very simple letter of support that you are interested. There is no commitment whatsoever, other than you are willing to listen and sit down and see if and examine further if there are opportunities within the Living Lab format to develop new forest businesses and activities within Six Nations. The Living Lab itself, it goes for 5 years. The funding is quite significant. It is into the multiple millions of dollars. It is a combination of we're looking at submitting approximately 7 living labs. And we think, including First Nations into the development of Living Lab, it has never been done in the province before. And we think that this would be an important step to engaging First Nations lands and individuals and to, again, further support sort of the development of forest and agriculture within the territory. Over the next deadline after this one is the middle of December. And it's at that time, so over the next 2 months, we would have time to sit down with you and look at the opportunities that are there, which ones we feel are appropriate, and then develop a budget around those activities. What we're looking at is that we would engage not only local landowners, but also local individuals to help staff up. So there could be training as well as employment just directly from the development of the labs. And then we're hoping the labs themselves would have economic spin-offs that could, again, further be engaged throughout the territory and including Six Nations landowners and or individuals. Right now, We have a very wide-ranging group of collaborators. All the agricultural associations are involved, and so they are helping with research and technology, as well as getting us engaged with different farming farmers and non-farmers, woodlot owners across the province. And just knowing Kerry and sort of the fantastic forested opportunities that we have on the territory, I just thought that this was an opportunity that certainly would be worthy of you examining and having some discussions of whether or not we could further this along so that it really could have an impact within Six Nations. So there's a quick overview of it. Of course, there would be more discussions that would take place, and we would come and visit with you and meet with yourselves and staff and see whether or not. The other thing that's very cool about this is the one thing, the OWA, we also got funding from the federal government. This one is Environment Canada instead of Agricultural Canada. And it is to develop a private land inventory across the province. And the technology that we're using is LiDAR, which is light imagery. And we're able to, very, very easily collect data on exactly the species, stalking, basal area, the size of the trees, the species of the trees for very large areas. So we could develop a forest inventory for Six Nations so that you could use it yourself going forward for other projects. The other thing is, 1 second. Sorry about that, that was my phone. The other thing is, sorry, I just lost my train of thought there. Oh, the LiDAR. The thing that we believe that would be very, very interesting and unique is part of the funding is we could take LiDAR imagery every year across the territory, and it would allow us to measure the carbon sequestration that is taking place. This is sort of to provide us a baseline of what's there, and then for the activities we do over the next 5 years, we'd be able to measure their impact to carbon sequestration. It's never been done in the province before, and we think there's a unique opportunity there to generate some valuable, invaluable data that will tell us where we stand right now in terms of the quality of the forest and the carbon sequestration that it's taking place, and through the additionality, through improvements of forest management and thus the increase in additionality, we'd be able to measure that carbon sequestration. And it's from there we'll be able to tell whether or not the activities we are doing will have any impact on climate change in terms of reducing the rate of temperature increases. My understanding is from the US Forestry Service, if we do not engage our woodlands, it'll be impossible for us to revert climate change. Reduction of fossil fuels and the improvement of the infrastructure to use those fossil fuels, they account for about 1/3 of the reduction. The other 2/3 is actually has to be done through forest management. Plantations by far give us the greatest carbon sequestrations. Hardwoods are the next. And so part of it is increasing forest cover and afforestation, but the other part is to improve the management of our existing woodlands. And that's where we're coming to Six Nations on and providing guidance, assistance, working with. We would very much like this to be driven by your community. And so again, whether or not it is through staffing and training, that is where we think there could be huge improvements across the landscape for you. Any questions, concerns?
Okay, thank you, Nyawa Paul, for bringing this forward to council. Again, I do recognize and acknowledge and hear the views and points from Councillor Wright in terms of due diligence. Again, this is we just had a phone call on Saturday with Councillor Carey on this matter, just bringing this forward for a potential opportunity. Again, given the time frame to this in meeting the request. So again, let's have a further discussion, deliberation, looking to further questions, comments.
Mark, I have a comment.
Sure, go for it, Helen.
I can't get myself on the screen here, so this sounds really big, and I've been listening to Paul talk about sequestering carbons. I think he needs to really meet with Phil Mentor, because Phil Mentor is working on those carbon credits for our community. So I think he needs to meet with Phil and talk to Phil about this to see if it could work in with the carbon credits. I don't know if when they sequester carbons, if they're going to try and use do carbon credits. But anyway, I think he needs to talk to Phil Mentor. I also think if it's coming into economic development opportunities, he should be talking with Matt Jamieson over at the Development Corporation to see if they can tie in with that somehow. So I read the material, and I didn't honestly really understand a whole lot when I read the material, but now that he's explained it, it sounds like a really big thing, and I'm having little issues with deciding something like this on the spur of the moment, so to speak. I would really like him to talk with Phil Mentor and have Phil Mentor maybe advise us as to what he thinks we should do, because he's been working with the carbon credits and different things like that for like going on 10 years. So that would be my suggestion. But I know he said he needs his letter today, but I think it's a really good idea to do that with, because we need to do something like that with our forests and stuff like that. But I don't know if I feel comfortable making a decision on such a short notice. I think we need to have discussions on this. Like I said, I would prefer that he had some discussions with Phil Mentor before council agrees to get involved in this. I know the letter is just, we're not committing to anything, but I don't know. I'm not clear. I'm a little bit kind of like hesitant, I guess, because I don't know enough.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Helen, for your comments, and obviously share the same hesitancy as well as Councillor Wright, just in terms of the timing. And again, this is our conversation with Carrie. We did recognize as well, that there potentially could be, some hesitancy just given the timing of the request. And I do hear your point as well, to include individuals like Matt Jamieson and Phil. I actually even mentioned to Carrie perhaps with Nathan as well as the Environment Task Force lead, to potentially have further conversations on different of the impacts across the board, like climate change and the environmental impacts. Did mention as well potentially Rod Whitlow. So maybe, I'm not sure if, and we could further have a discussion around extension. Paul, maybe perhaps there's something that we can even look to, given the time frame, that we can at least have these conversations before looking to the request of a letter of support. I'm not sure if you could signal that to the funders or program or whatnot, but we can have a further discussion around that. Sherry Lynn has her hand up.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was just gonna say what you're saying, Chief. Yeah, and also what Nathan and Helen said. And I think even, our farmers, our other departments that also need, like, what's the plan? There's just so many pieces to this that I'm not in support of doing a letter right now. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that, Sherry Lynn. Michelle.
I was just. Okay, somebody's on.
Okay. Um, all right, my
Sorry, she's having a little bit of issue. So you may have to also just gauge your volume to those in the room.
If I could add, Chief Hill,
Sure.
the letter of support, yes, it is. I appreciate that this is short notice. The way that the deadline and development of the living labs is sort of in different stages. And there are many other organizations that are in the same state as you, where they still need to delve deeper. How do they integrate it into the other parts of their businesses, their community? And so that's the letter of support could in fact state that the letter of support is subject to meeting with additional staff and additional departments. We assume that would be the case anyways, but it could actually state that. So there, again, further strengthens the sort of the commitment by council to say that, you know, yes, we're interested, but there needs to be a lot more discussion take place for us to officially commit. And so we would like to ask the designers or myself or whoever to meet with the various staff and different departments. And again, we would be doing that anyways, and great ideas to talk to Phil and Matt around economic development. And of course, the farmers are another big part of what we could engage. So yes, there are lots of pieces that we haven't put together and discussed, and the letter of support would just, again, part of the thing with the application is that the federal government wants to see these letters of support for us to understand how we're going to be moving forward. And like I said, there are a number of organizations that are still unsure of how they would participate, but they're willing to continue that conversation. And that's really what we're asking from you guys. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that, Paul. And just want to also acknowledge Michelle's comment in the chat in terms of the more connections to make. I think she even brings another party to this with our private forestry businesses who may be evolving their business in addition to the farmers. So just wanted to acknowledge Michelle's comments in the chat. I do see Audrey has her hand raised. Audrey?
And that was one of the recommendations I was going to make, like a letter of support in principle until we do that due diligence. I also would like to recommend that we have Guyana involved because they are working on invasive species as well as the forestry part. And also to remind you that we live in the largest Carolinian forest area here in Ontario. So we would like to continue that. So to make sure that they should be native to where we live. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that, Audrey. Sorry, Paul, did you have further comment to Audrey's point?
Just very quickly, Guyana say we have reached out to them and they are participating. They are providing advice and direction already. Thank you, Audrey.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that, Audrey. So again, there's multiple connections here. I do hear Audrey's point and as well as Paul's further comments in relation to what all could be stipulated within the letter of support. Obviously, due to our conversation this morning, there's much work to have in relation to connecting, the different partners, potential partners, in further conversations in the different areas like economic development, like farming, like forestry, and so forth. So I will look to further comments, questions, and then we can decide where we go from that point. I see Helen has her hand raised.
Yeah, I have no problem with Audrey's suggestion or Paul's suggestion that if we write a letter of support, we can put in there all of the things that need to get done, that we're not really going ahead of the project, but just we're whatever they said, I can't remember. But I would agree to that kind of a letter, like Audrey said, or Paul was said to do.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that, Helen. And I do. I think that as well, just for advice to council, can look to, because we don't want to miss out on opportunity either while we still have to do our due diligence. So I can definitely see that that way going forward as well. Hazel has her hand raised.
Yes, yeah, I think this project sounds very interesting. I think there's still a lot of discussion to be had. And I think if this presentation could happen with the Farmers Association too, that would probably be something that they'd be interested in. I think I support the idea of having a letter that says that Six Nations is interested, but also that the letter informs that they want to do more due diligence and having a presentation made to various groups, like what Helen said with Phil and I don't know who else she mentioned, but I think also the farmers. I think it sounds promising, but like any topic, you have to do your due diligence at first. So I think a letter can be drafted in that manner. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Hazel, for your comments as well. Recognizing some more chat, and I believe Nathan has his hand up for further comments, question, and then I'll head over to Greg next in line. Nathan, you have the floor.
Just a comment so that we're coordinated going into this, and because it sounds like everyone's just kind of throwing out different parties to meet with. Chief, what we can do is the environmental task force, who I believe does this work, I think, we'll bring the parties together and can definitely re-engage Paul to come back going forward. So that's something, and we do meet the last Wednesday of every month. We can bring in the majority that's been suggested here, as long as we get the notes and kind of coordinate that. That way, it's probably the most expedient way to do this. So Paul's not running around trying to meet with all of these groups by himself. I think the Environment Task Force can bring that together. So I'm just offering that at this point. I'm still not 100. I'm not 100% there, but I can live with a support letter that we're doing due diligence. So I'll just say that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Nathan. And that was exactly part of our conversations this past weekend, Nate, just to include, obviously, the Environment Task Force on this piece. So do appreciate your suggestion on that. Greg has further question, comment.
Yes, hello. Yeah, I agree with what everybody's been saying. But it is such a short notice to get a letter out today. But my question is when does the final decision have to be made? I think you mentioned December 17th. Is that correct?
That's actually the 16th, but we would, Councillor Greg, we would be meeting with you. Like Nathan has said, it would be great to meet with the different groups all at once, but there would be a number of meetings to, again, continue to build out what you would like to do. There is a lot of groundwork that still needs to be done for any of this to come together. So yes, meeting with the Farmers Association and the Environmental Task Force and helping you with your carbon sequestration, all those things can be part of this. It's now the next step is to sit down with those committees and those groups within Six Nations and develop of how we can use this living lab to move ahead some of the things that they are already doing.
So the December 16th date, that's not really a hard and fast date. That's probably a movable date.
No, these dates are 16th is hard and fast. We would like to have sort of your proposal, your work plan for your living lab ready for around the December the 1st. That would be our target with the next stage. And again, there would be several opportunities for myself or other individuals to come back and make presentation to council, to keep you first informed of how things are developing and where it's happening, so you can understand sort of what different parts of the community and committees are being engaged. And then, of course, by the time the thing comes to a final submission, if we're able to put something together, you'll be very well informed of exactly what it means, who's involved, and where are going to be the not only the economic benefits, but the environmental benefits that would come to Six Nations.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Greg and Paul, for your responses. I see Audrey has her hand raised.
And just one more point. If we do this and say the larger properties are chosen which have a large amount of forests on them, the training that they're given, is it possible to include that for the average homeowner who has a woodlot, to know how to thin their woodlot and to maintain it, and also to add Carolinian growth to replace it? So you don't want to, you want to thin it, but you also want to make sure that the Carolinian forest is strong and healthy and will continue to expand. Yeah.
If I could, Chief Hill.
Sure, Paul.
Great suggestions. And yes, that is very much, there is no size restriction. We are not looking for just the big woodlot. We're actually looking for adaptation on a small scale, big scale, medium scale. What we're looking at is the living labs. We would have 1 day a year, a farm and forest open day. So everyone from the community could come and visit the properties that these different activities have taken place, so that there would be sort of local and internal education and knowledge transfer. Knowledge transfer is a very big part of this living lab. Actually, to me, once the innovation has been identified, the transfer of how it can be adopted across the landscape is the next most paramount activity of the funding. And the funding wants us to develop best management practices. So we would develop literature as well as other social media and webinars that would help landowners of all different levels of knowledge and stewardship, so that again we can advance the most basic of landowner to the most sophisticated landowner. So someone who has never done anything to their woodlot to someone who is a active farmer who is managing not only their woodlands but their agricultural lands. I think there would be things that both levels, all levels of landowner knowledge would be improved.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And also just wanted to acknowledge Councillor Sherry Lynn's comments in the chat in terms of, is this letter that is being requested for Indigenous support to help him to get a check mark for partnering with us, and what does Six Nations get out of it? So I just wanted to acknowledge Sherry Lynn's comments in the chat as well. Paul, not sure if there's any further comment to Sherry Lynn's.
Well, she does bring up a very good point. Part of it is we do have engagements of other First Nations across the province. This is more of a personal thing for me. I live in Niagara. I see Brant being part of the Niagara Peninsula, the Carolinian Canada zone, which is where I specialize in. I have a deep appreciation for the history and the commitment by Six Nations landowners, from the hundreds that I've met through Gypsy Moth and the open houses that we've had over the last 20 years. And my relationship with Carrie, and being a forest technician from Fleming, where, see, this is the other thing that's very cool, is that we're engaging 4 colleges, hopefully a 5th, and they are going to help us collect data and learn and become better stewards. So again, we can engage high school students from Six Nations as part of this as well. They're, again, all the knowledge transfer would be an important part of the next stage of the development of our work plan for the activities that could go on Six Nations. So to answer Sherry Lynn's question, yes, to some degrees, a check mark is always important. That's sort of how the world goes around when you're asking for millions of dollars. But really, the most important thing is to have committed, engaged landowners where we can make both an environmental and economic difference. And really, that is the main purpose that I reached out to Kerry, is that I thought there were some significant benefits that could happen to yourselves.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Paul, for those further comments. So I think, again, recognizing the concerns in terms of the timing and the short request, however, also to the pivot points of, the looking to a letter of support with the stipulations in there, like a letter in principle at this time, while the further due diligence work happens. I think the next step from this would be to have conversation with Nathan as well, like Nathan's suggestion to bring all of the parties together at the Environment Task Force, so that we can again start to engage further with all these different parties that could potentially play a role in this bigger picture. So looking to further questions, comments, and how council would like to proceed. I see Audrey has her hand raised.
I make a motion that we send that letter of in principle and also include that we have to do due diligence, and I agree with having Nate be the point person to set this up.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for that, Audrey. There's a motion on the floor moved by Audrey for the letter of support in principle with the items noted of the due diligence pieces and so forth, and as well for the request of Paul and Nathan to connect to further bring parties together to look at the next steps. Is there a seconder to that motion?
I'll second that, Chief. I think it's a good idea.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. Seconded by Carrie. Are there further questions, comments to the motion? And I'll look to perhaps maybe even Nate and Christopher off the line to look at the generation of this letter and what's all it's entailed. Okay, seeing or hearing no further questions or comments, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Any opposed?
I do. I oppose Michelle.
One opposed, Councillor Michelle.
I oppose also.
Oh,
Sherry
sorry,
Lynn.
Sherry Lynn opposed. Motion is carried. Okay, looking to, if I can, I believe we have enough in terms of second reading to get this letter out hope by end of day. Looking to a second reading waive motion. Moved by Audrey, seconder.
I will.
Second by Carrie. All in favor? Any opposed?
Me.
Councillor Michelle.
Sherry
and
Lynn.
Councillor Sherry Lynn opposed second reading, and I believe it's based upon the short time frame notice, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, motion is carried. Okay, Paul, so there is some obviously next big steps here that we have to connect all these individuals in further presentations. I'll work with Christopher out of our office, as well as have Nate have his lens on the letter as well, so that we can again make sure we're in line with the conversation of this morning.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that being said, thank you as well, Paul, for joining us. And again, do look forward to our next steps here and where we can go with this opportunity.
All right. Thank you very much, Council. I'm over here all day in my office, so if Nate needs to reach out to me at all, and then the next stage would be to to meet, to speak with Nathan to arrange a meeting in the next couple of weeks. It would be something we would need to move on because there are lots of moving parts and lots of opportunities. So I'll get in touch with him and we can arrange a date for which we can begin the discussions.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for that, Paul. Okay, well, thank you so much again, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that, Paul. So that being said, then council, that was our one additional new business. I will at this point look for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Helen, seconder. Second by Greg. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing or hearing the motion is carried. Thank you to everyone for joining us online for general finance this morning. I hope you all have a great day.